the Business Excellence Podcast. On this show, we'll talk about everything to do with entrepreneurship, business ownership, sustainability, and longevity of lasting and succeeding in your business. I'm your host for today, Darryn Fisher. Let's jump in. We're here today with our 2022 inductee, the wonderful Lindsay Faithfull. Welcome, Lindsay.
Kia ora, Darryn. Pleased to be here.
Lindsay, your credentials are well-founded, well-respected, and you are the Managing Director of McKay Electrical Naut and the Wellington Boat Company, and also the Deputy Chair of Tupu Tonu Investment Fund, as well as a number of other governance roles that you fulfil here in Northland. Geez, you've had a good career so far. What do you think?
Yeah, it's certainly been interesting. I started my working career as an apprentice electrician in the beginning of 1977. I think I was 17 years old, and embarking on a trades career at that point, I never would have imagined some of the things I've ended up doing. Life was a lot simpler then, and the goals were very straightforward.
Yeah, excellent. And prior to your apprenticeship, where did you grow up? Tell us a bit about your young childhood and your parents and some of your background.
Yeah, so born in Te Rerenga on the west coast of Northland, whakapapa to the mid-north, Ngàpuhi Te Rerenga in the Waimate north area, but moved to Whangarei when I was about 2 years old with the family, and so my early years totally were in Whangarei, so Whangarei Primary, Whangarei Intermediate, Whangarei Boys High, and many years later find myself back in Whangarei. So yeah, that's the formative years. We used to live in what would be regarded now as a classic villa opposite McDonald's on Bank Street. That's where I was as a kid. My mother had a different view of it. She said it was a drafty old cold house.
Oh, cool. And brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so older brother David, who lives in Western Australia, he's had a university career that he's now retired from. My late older sister Vicky, who was a pharmacist, ended up chief pharmacist at the Whangarei base hospital. She was quite a remarkable woman, one of the last people in New Zealand to get polio. And then when she was 50, got a very aggressive cancer that killed her off very quickly. But yeah, she was an amazingly successful and tough woman.
Yeah, excellent.
And then my younger sister Nicola, who is now semi-retired to Kerry.
Right.
Yeah, so there were four of us growing up.
Great.
Yeah.
So still a close association with the North.
Yeah,
great.
Well, very much so, yeah.
Excellent. And so what's your take on your apprenticeship? So some people choose the university route, some people more the trade route. Do you have a view, opinion, anything there?
Yeah, well, I did both. So I guess I do have some views. I was intending to go to university, and then I'm sure happens to a lot of kids between 6th and 7th form, years 12 to 13 over that summer. I just I watched some electricians in action and thought, oh, I'd like to do that. And my father, who had been bugging me to become an apprentice, got the shock of his life when I said, yeah, okay. My mother was appalled because her father was an electrician and her husband was an electrician, and she didn't intend her son to be one. But I said, don't worry, Mum. When I've done this trade, I'll go to university then. And I don't think she believed me, but that's what I ended up doing. So 4-year apprenticeship, which was very, very fulfilling and great. But when I finished with that, I went to Canterbury University and did a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronic engineering, and then I never really worked as a tradie ever since. So apart from those formative 4 apprenticeship years, then I went off into a professional engineering career.
Excellent. And in many cases we see in Northland people travel abroad and then bring those skills home. Is that something you've done in your lifetime?
Yeah. I was very fortunate that when I came out of university, the refinery expansion was just kicking off. So I came back to Whangarei and they needed engineers. And so McKay, I came back to work for McKay, and then McKay hired me to the refinery. And I worked there as a project engineer for a couple of years. So that got me into the oil and gas industry. And from there, as the expansion was winding to a close, like a lot of young Kiwis, it was time to head overseas. So Australia and then the UK. And I had quite a good few years in the UK working in the oil and gas industry as a design engineer, but mainly for North Sea oil projects, so oil and gas. And that was very, very educational and got me exposed to some very large projects. Over there, projects are, many hundreds of millions of pounds as a matter of course, got exposure to very large scale oil and gas projects, which was great for an education and great for understanding how the professional design process works.
Excellent. So you must have returned back to New Zealand at about that time and started a family and got yourself into business. How did that transition work?
Yeah. I was sailing along in the UK in the early 90s. I had a good engineering career, mid-level person in a very large global engineering company with tens of thousands of people. But New Zealand was in the teeth of a recession, and my father gave me a call and said he could do with some help. And, if you ever want to run a business, now's the time to put your hand up. So thought about that for a while. Had a wife, Alison, who I'd met over there. We had a small child, our oldest, Lauren. So it was a big call to make, but we decided to make the move. New Zealand at that stage was certainly in pretty dire straits and sort of arrived back into the teeth of a really fierce recession. It was very, very hard work. And the only thing really to do was to work very hard and grow the business back to its former glory, because it had been very successful over a long period of time, but had really had experienced the highs and lows that happens when you're in business for many decades. You get all these boom times and then not so good times, and the plan then was to grow the business, and then eventually worked out that we needed to make it more sustainable and resilient to these slings and arrows of the economy.
And I'm sure you've seen many over your years now that we've had 3 or 4 major events in the economy since then.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that sort of helps you get through those times, both professionally, business-wise, mentally, physically? What is it that helps you carry on through?
I think a good deal of obstinance certainly helps. Sort of never say die attitude. But what we worked out was that building a company that relied on large-scale capital projects alone was not the best way to go, because that really subjected to those peaks and troughs. So we made a conscious decision to move into more long-term maintenance type projects, and that's really done us well. And our longest contract is a 30-year contract we have with the Royal New Zealand Navy, and we're about halfway through that. But we have lots of multi-year contracts with mainly with local government, and that thinking about what will make your business resilient was something we did, and it's worked out very well. But we haven't stopped doing large capital projects, and we are still doing those. It's just that we have a much broader spread of sources of income now.
Excellent. And your personal, physical and mental well-being, how do you factor that into that whole journey as well? Well,
once, of course, you exit your 20s and you lose that bulletproof armour that we all think we have when we're younger, you have to start thinking about your own resilience. And I think life goes through stages. You get into your 30s, children arrive, and so all your effort goes into small children, and then maybe, if you're lucky, you realise as you approach being 40 or 40 plus that you've actually got to start thinking about your own well-being and health. And I was fortunate to go on the Icehouse Owner Manager program in 2003, and that focused very much on your personal well-being as well as the company's well-being, and also the relationship between those two. So that was a good introduction, and then on the home front, we sort of gradually developed approach to healthy living, which has been good. And then over the last 12 years, I've been going to a boot camp 3 times a week, early in the morning, and that's just become such a habit. I've gone from a person who's not a morning person now to seriously exercising at 6 in the morning, and that's been also a revelation. And you have to work on yourself, and then you have to work on the business, but you can't just totally focus on the business.
Absolutely, I agree. And to build a suite of businesses of your size, north of $100+ million, I'm sure there's an old saying that would resonate with you, and that is to go fast, go alone, go far, go together. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, look, we've if I look back over the life of the company, we've had a lot of people come and some go, of course, from the business, but everyone that's been there has, on the whole, contributed something towards the breadth, the depth, and the growth of the business. And I think it's worthwhile mentioning, some individuals. I mean, my father, Joe Faithfull, really, he should be the one sitting here telling his story, because he was the real entrepreneur. He always took on things that he didn't know anything about, and he just went and found out about it, and so he was a great example in what you've got to do in order to grow a business, especially into areas that you don't have a background in. But some of the early people that I guess I would describe them as great characters in the business, and we probably don't have them anymore. There was Bill Banks, Gary Ferguson, Maury Herbert, Noel Driver. These are all people from the early 70s the late 70s, but had been with the business a long time. And of course, when I came back into the business in the 80s, in the 90s, some of these people were still around, and I was now their boss, whereas I'd been their apprentice. And they all took it with reasonably good grace. And so I think, having a team is important. And now we've got a team of around about 700. And we've had to adjust our top management team as we go through, to make sure that we're not only managing what we've got now, but we're positioned for growth. So I have a very good in McKay, a very good executive leadership team of 7. I used to have double those direct reports, but we've fine-tuned that over the last couple of years, and we're just now getting ourselves ready for that, next leap of growth that we want to enter into.
Yeah, excellent. That's going to be my next question.
Okay, sure.
Is where to from here for you? And do you have a view on using debt to grow? Do you have at the moment, business debt's quite high, but do you have a view on how to use it for growth?
Yeah, it might be high. It's not high for us. So I think you've always got this balance, in that banks love to lend you money, but some of them behave in a way that they try and pull it back as soon as some dark clouds appear. So you have to keep a balance in terms of what you do. But banks generally have these debt to equity ratios which have been fairly well established over a long period of time, and I think if you can stay within that, then that's good. I don't have a problem with using debt to grow, but a reasonable amount of debt. So,
did you find your time on the tools transitioning over into your further education, your university degree? Did you see how much that helped you with the practical side going into the university degree?
Yeah, look, of course, once you go into a professional engineering career, having that practical experience is valuable. But I'd have to say, I've got very good friends at Canterbury University who came straight from high school who have become excellent engineers, and of course I know a lot of tradespeople who have gone into design and managerial careers, and they're perfectly okay. So. I'm not an advocate for one or the other. It worked for me doing a trade training first and then going to university, and you know, I'm very happy with where I've ended up. And I guess for my business, where as the managing director, sometimes your main task is to be a generalist. So you're the one that people come to ask if all else fails. Then having that broad knowledge and being able to help people in whatever field they're doing is certainly useful. But you know, what I've observed now with the size that the business has become is there are certainly a whole lot of people in the business that can do things a lot better than me in specific areas, and you know, and it's good to see that. I can see that in our executive leadership team now as well. You know, so just because you're the boss doesn't mean you're the best at everything. So you have to come to that realization and be open to that assistance.
Yeah, cool. And we'll come back to that and dig into that a little bit more, because I'm fascinated by how different people build greater teams. But is there any reason why Canterbury was the right fit for you in terms of university? Did you look at others and just...
Yeah, look, back in the day. While I was doing my apprenticeship, I did a New Zealand Certificate of Engineering, and that used to get you the first 2 years off a degree. And you could get into Auckland or Canterbury with that. I got into both, but I just decided I hadn't really been to the South Island, so I'll go to Canterbury. And I have a standing joke because my oldest daughter went to Auckland, so you know, we joke about you know, which engineering school might be better, but they're both high quality engineering schools which set you up on a world scene very well. So yeah, the idea was I could see something of the South Island, but of course when you're a student and you're doing an engineering degree, you haven't got much time to look around. So
typical Kiwi itchy feet syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
So just back to your point about building a team. So what have you found the hardest or the most rewarding on either end of the scale about building those teams, having those people around you? I think once before we've talked, and you mentioned you survived a coup at one stage. So keen to understand that as well.
Yeah. Look, I think that, you know, recruitment is, especially recruitment at the top end of business, is one of the hardest jobs that you've got, and it's certainly not something that you just want to leave to recruiting companies. I think as the senior leader in a business, you need to take a very close personal interest in who you're getting on board, especially for those key roles. And I can't understate enough the importance of reference checks and understanding those reference checks. But as I said, everyone that we've had into the business on the whole has contributed something. And help the business grow and be successful, and I'm grateful for that. But everyone has to remember who owns the business, and not much point in coming up against that person because it'll only end one way.
That's right. Yeah. You're the one with all the risk on the table.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you've got some wrong by the sound of it.
Oh, you know, we've been in business for nearly 90 years. And, you know, inevitably, you know, not all hires are fantastic. But I guess the main lesson is if you get it wrong, deal with it as soon as you can.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. There's a saying that's sort of quite prominent at the moment, is if you're going to fail fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Recognise it and deal with it,
and
as opposed to let it fester.
Yeah, but look, it's also, you know, when you're recruiting, and especially when you want senior people, you know, you can get attracted to very flash-looking CVs and very flash-looking work histories. What you have to really understand is this person a good human being? That's the main important thing to find out. Pretty much everything else you can be learned and trained, etc. You know, so I think that. And then finding out that will fit within your business, you know, I think will be important. So for private businesses like ours, you know, one of the learnings is you just have to be very careful with people that have come out of large corporates. They've had a different mode of operation, and once again, I'm generalising here, but that would be I guess a small piece of advice that I've found.
No, likewise, actually, on a business ownership perspective, I've employed a few people similar out of corporate backgrounds, and I just find that they are career driven.
Yep.
In that they're looking to promote themselves, not necessarily the broader interest of the business or the community in which they're upon. So I completely resonate with what you're saying there as well.
And once again, it's important not to overgeneralize these things, because I've also had some very good people have come out of those corporate backgrounds, but you just need to really check in on that human being side, motivation, etc., and really listen to your references, or get references and really listen to them. And as a leader, I don't depend on other people doing those for me. If I'm hiring someone that's reporting to me, I want to hear the tone of the referee. When you ask an important question like, would you hire this person again? I'm looking for hesitation. I guess a certain tone that indicates that perhaps they're not telling you exactly what you should be hearing, all those sort of little nuances. And you can't get that by reading a transcript that a recruiter has done for you. So those key hires, they're probably one of the most important jobs you'll do. So getting those people in and then growing those people, there's no more important work in a business.
Do you find a good hire will in turn then grow your business as well?
Absolutely.
So you've just mentioned one really good question that I always ask as well, and that is, would you rehire this person? Have you got any other key questions that you like to ask when you're reference checking?
I like to try and ascertain what sort of energy they bring to the role. Do they talk about the joy of getting things done, or do they talk about strategizing? So you want, you want people that are action orientated and will make things happen and bring energy to their role. Or are they the sort of person they're going to suck energy out of the room, and do the opposite? So, that's probably the other thing. I like to hear what their standard day looks like, because that gives me an idea about how they operate. Quite often people actually struggle to tell you what their average day looks like, which is interesting in itself.
You're right. It's common in sports teams as well, isn't it? You hear that often, as we know what we're getting, maybe from a rugby player or a rugby league player or something of that nature, but we're looking to recruit good people first and foremost, because that brings stability, consistency to the overall team and organisation. So that resonates really well across the board. Thinking about your own day, what does a day look like for you? I mean, you're someone who manages a large portfolio of business, has multiple things going. What does an average day for Lindsay look like?
Excuse me. It's changed probably the last year. It's changed quite dramatically, because I've got this new executive team that are now doing a lot of the work that I used to do, and so it's I'll say it's enjoyable. I've got time to think, and I've even got the luxury of having I've hired someone specifically to do strategy and innovation, and that was, I would have seen that as my main job. So I really can work on the business now. But I think every business advisor, consultant, coach, accountant who tells business people what to do will tell them about working on it and not in it. The fact is, you've got to do both, because if you don't work in your business in some way, then you're not feeling the pulse of what's going on. And I like to describe the best approach is you need to be connected at all levels of the business, so you know what's going on. But that's not so that you can mess up the organisation of the business to be, cutting people out from the, from an organisational point of view. But you need to be checking the pulse and knowing what's going on. And that's, that's got a real raw need from a health and safety point of view, but also from a health of the business point of view and where you're going to. But I've also got, I've got multiple organisations that I'm involved in. So I do a lot of governance stuff. So I've got, board meetings to deal with, board papers to read, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the strategy and where the future of the McKay business could go.
And the broader community. I know you do a lot of work in the broader Northland community. You sponsor our wonderful stadium here in Whangarei, and you do a number of other community work. Where does that fit in for you now these days in life?
Yeah, sponsoring the stadium doesn't require a lot of work apart from signing the bit of paper a few years ago. But yeah, really happy to do that. I see it as giving back to the community, and it's really nice that such a high-profile stadium in Whangarei is sponsored by a local company rather than a national corporate. So that's really good. It's also important for our staff. A lot of them go there. They go to the gym there. They use the facilities there. So to go there and be under that brand is really good for our employees. But yeah, what I try and do is if I'm going to involve myself in things, in that sort of community space, is things where we can make a difference. So I guess the classic is the Northland Corporate Group and the advocacy we did for the expressway from Auckland to Whangarei, and that seems to be getting some momentum now and a nod from the government. So, really happy with that. I've been involved in the Tai Tokerau Northland Economic Action Plan since about 2015, I think, and that's been a good thing to do as well. Good to know what's going on, but also good to be able to contribute. And one of the things that I look around the country and see other provinces do really well is that unified approach to making their province great. Taranaki is one I always refer to. They always seem to be very solid and very tight. And I'd say up here, Te Tai Tokerau, we've got a way to go on that front, but I see some green shoots now in terms of the province coming together and operating as one. So that's important to me because this is where I live and this is where my business is based. But of course, for McKay, about 85% of our business occurs in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So, I say that with some measure of balance because, the progress of New Zealand is important to me as well.
Yeah, no, very good points. And I think it's important, people who achieve success, that they have a sense of connectivity to their home, and a sense of purpose that brings. And how does it make you feel when you see some of those things actually coming to fruition? The nod from the government around the report that you did for the 4-lane highway and our progression of this economic development. How does that make you personally feel at the end of the day?
It makes me feel very positive about the future of our province, and I'm proud to be part of it, but I'm only part of it. A lot of work's gone in from a lot of people, including yourself, Darryn. So, we need to acknowledge everyone's input. Of course, the old saying, I think JFK made it famous: success has many fathers.
Yes.
Failure is an orphan, but that's fine. This success can have lots of fathers. At the end of the day, it's the outcome that's important.
Yeah. And how have you seen Northland grow and evolve over your time? Are you what excites you the most about where you see our future heading from an overall point of view? Yeah,
well, really, Northland's a magical place. It's possibly New Zealand's best kept secret. To be honest, I mean it's so close to Auckland that it's remarkable that it is a secret. But for many reasons, as we know, people don't come up here as much as they should. But it's this combination of this fantastic environment that we live in. Whangarei alone's got 100 beaches. I'm very pleased to be able to go to one of them quite a lot. So you've got, it's a great tourist destination, but of course its greatest natural resource is its people. And we have phenomenal people up here. And when you look at some of the small niche businesses that have been phenomenally successful, and it's just really impressive what some individuals are doing around the place. And so I have very high hopes. And of course, going back a couple of hundred years, this was the powerhouse of the country. So in some ways, if we can make Northland really successful, then we're just returning it to its former glory. And I think we have every chance of doing that.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of promise and a lot of scope for growth, and it's exciting to be a part of. Scaling your business, something that Northland, just like most of New Zealand, is very much built up of small to medium business, and it's very difficult at times to just break through some of those ceilings and have the courage to keep going. What was it that helped you sort of scale and get through some of those important milestones at certain points?
Well, you've got to have self-belief, and you need to be frankly, you need to be good at business development, So
business development, selling?
Yeah. But in a professional, I guess in our space, it's in a professional way. So you need to be able to write a good story if you want to sell your services. And a lot of the development of our business, we're doing it through formal tender processes. So you have to become very good at that. And, we don't think we're as good as we need to be still. But, we bid for a very large marine electrical project in the US last year. And, no prize for coming third, but we came third out of 8. And we got the bronze medal. We were right. Yep. We were right up there. We just couldn't quite get to the top. So I'm very proud of what we can do. And so it's about, how can you grow from what you've got? How do you maximize and leverage the resources and I guess including financial and people resources that you've got. And sometimes, you've just got to bite off more than you can chew and then chew very hard. I wouldn't say there's a secret to it, but you've you can plan and get the help you need, resource up, and then apply yourselves, I guess, diligently to what you've got to do now.
You brought up a few interesting points. I think I heard in there: self-belief, building your brand, telling your story, being good at business development. There's a number of key points that we could go into from there. But where do you think the self-belief comes from? I mean, were your parents very supportive? Like, was there a key thing in your upbringing that gave you that self-belief and that confidence just to get through it? Or was it something you developed yourself over time? How's that come around?
Excuse me. I think, very supportive family, the family I came from, my own family now, is a good start, and also I had a father, Joe, who, believed anything was possible, so I had I guess some good role models around me. I think for me, and this won't be the same for everyone, but the university education was definitely an eye opener, because I think what it taught you is that every problem is solvable. You just have to think hard, and that's what university does. It equips you with some problem-solving skills, and in my case, with some very specific electrical engineering skills. But still, what it's teaching you to do is, okay, here's a problem. How do I solve it? So thinking anything is possible, I think, is probably the main one. But personal resilience. I definitely say for me that was an overnight success that had to be built up over some period of time.
And that's all we are as entrepreneurs at the end of the day, isn't it? Is problem solvers at one level or another. And by solving a problem, that in turn creates confidence and allows you to continue and push through. So, I agree. Building your brand, something you mentioned earlier, telling your story. Building that from domestic or Northland throughout the country and then internationally. How have you managed to do that? Any key highlights?
Yeah, look, I mean, once again, I can only just give our own experience, but and this is amusing because the McKay, prior to being McKay, we were McKay Electrical, and we dropped the electrical through the branding process that we did in the mid 2000s, which I'll explain why. But McKay Electrical used to have this little man with a lightning bolt as a symbol, and Dad was so pleased with that he trademarked it, and occasionally other sparkies around the country would steal it, and it would pop up in advertising, and they'd get a letter from our lawyer saying please desist, and and all that sort of thing. So we went through this rebranding exercise. We paid a lot of money to a professional design company in Auckland to do it, and the little man with the lightning bolt got dropped in a heartbeat, and boy, that took some talking to my father to get him used to that idea. But if you're an electrical company, things like lightning bolts and green and blue colouring are used something like 60% plus, and this is around the world. So if you want to be unique and have competitive advantage, stay away from those sort of things. I think the next most used brand is the atomic symbol. That's another one. So stay right away from that. And the design company, came up with this black and copper branding, which for us, where we'd come from, we were mouths open when they showed it to us, But when we saw it on uniforms, vehicles, buildings, we got it. It took a few minutes, but then okay, this is good. So I think the key lesson I'd say is something like a brand is so important, and it's going to be around for such a long time. Don't get my kid can draw this to design your brand. Go and get professional advice. And it's not, brands aren't created just by someone being creative and sitting in a room and with some graphic artistry and capability. There's a whole story that you want to build, and that whole process of understanding where you want to be in the market. So we got professional advice. We came up with the brand, and it's really stood the test of time. And there's a whole lot of other features about the brand, which I won't go into now, which are very strong. And I guess the real test is we embarked on developing our business in the US in the late 2000s. And the uniform feedback we got from our customers, potential customers, is they felt we were a lot bigger and more substantial than what we actually were. So clearly the brand was telling the right story, and there's nothing better than going to, a client's office on the east coast of the US. You go all the way in there, and there's your calendar up on the wall with your brand featuring. It sort of, you go, yep, I think we're getting this right.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that's part of the misunderstanding sometimes is that you can be perceived to be much bigger than what you are, but it's a good thing when you're shooting for the stars.
Yeah,
you're looking to grow.
Absolutely. Oh, and I was going to mention, why we dropped the electrical. The other thing the brand process told us was that if you were something electrical, then people assumed you wired houses, and so we had to drop that, and also. We did a much wider array of things than just doing electrical work. So that was the other reason we needed to drop the electrical word.
Yeah, good to understand. You mentioned your long-term contracts, your multi-year maintenance contracts and the like. So when you're tendering and winning these large contracts, how do you observe and manage the risk in terms of, if you fail or something goes awry in those contracts? How do you manage the risk on those?
Yeah, look, it's a demanding process. Certainly experience helps, but what I've learned over the years is make sure you get the best advice. So I'm not a lawyer. I understand contracts as an engineer, but if there's anything that's sort of outside a fairly vanilla NZS 3910 style contract, then you need to get good advice. And even then, with special conditions being written into contracts, even 3910 contracts, you need to understand how all that works together, and that's where you need that professional advice. In days gone by, we've got ourselves into some trouble with contracts, and where the lawyers have, we've gone to their help after the event, and they've said, you should have really contacted us before. So understand what the contracts mean, get really good advice. But, the construction industry, unfortunately is not for the faint-hearted. And, there's, New Zealand's probably had its fair share of high-profile stuff-ups, and we're still feeling the effects of that. Drives people out of business, drives subcontractors out of business, So it's a tough business to be in. But, unfortunately, success, and I say that in inverted commas, is achieved by a lot of bullying, especially by larger companies on smaller ones, and by the individuals in those larger companies. And that doesn't actually produce the best result. The best contracts we've been on have been run on a one-team approach where everyone's invested in achieving a good outcome. And if you get an enlightened client, main contractor, set of consultants that are all part of that and drive a project in that way, you can get an extremely good result.
Have you ever knocked one back? A big contract, big opportunity. Have you ever gone into it and said, no, this is not the right environment for success?
Oh, we turn them down quite constantly.
Oh,
yes,
good.
Yes, yeah, no, we don't take on everything. Some of that's due to resourcing, of course, and our ability to deal with it. But we've certainly experienced some types of contract that we would never take on again. I've also got a small but growing list of banned customers, so I'm not going to tell you who they are, but there's certainly some high-profile businesses that we'll never work for again, because the culture's not good in our view, and we don't want, as well as the financial risks, it puts enormous personal pressure on our staff, and we don't want that to happen.
No, good on you. You got to stick to your culture. And stick to your own rules.
Yeah,
that's great. Just thinking about how those contracts might play out, and something that's really important for all businesses, large, small, and otherwise, is cash flow. How do you go into those contract negotiations and do the right thing by both your client and yourself from a cash flow point of view and structure it?
Well, in the construction industry, if you want to be in it, you have to accept that you're not going to get paid much money up front, so you tend to get paid after the event. The key when you take it on is two things. One is understand what the payment terms are, so make sure you actually understand it. And I'm talking down to the day you're going to get paid each month. That's really important. But secondly, any contract of a half decent size, do a cash flow model before you start, because there's a common belief that if you get paid every month, then you'll be all right. Well, not necessarily, and you have to look at what happens if things start to go wrong. So, understand the payment terms and do a good cash flow model.
We've seen inflation run rampant over the last sort of few years. How have you protected yourself from a tender or pricing perspective from inflation?
Well, I mean, in recent times we've been as firm as we can in terms of getting good cost fluctuation adjustments in the contract. And most enlightened customers understand that. There's still, you'll get the odd project where there's pressure to do something on a lump sum. For a very short-term contract, that might be okay, but you have to assess the risk at the time. And of course, if you are, then make sure you price that risk in. And that's something that I think New Zealand companies have to learn a lot more, is pricing risk.
Definitely, and I think there's some lessons to come out of the last few years and how things have gone. How did COVID affect you at all?
Well, we of course that first week was what is this? Is this going to be a global meltdown of some sort? You really didn't know, but after about a week, things sort of settled down. We could see where things were headed, but that 5 weeks, I think. We only did about 25% of the work we'd normally do, but most of that work still had to be done. So when we were allowed back to work, we were busier than ever. So in actual fact, things turned out okay, and we rode through it quite happily. But I also had the thought when I was sitting there trying to decide just how bad this might be that, my father and my grandparents had been through world wars and other major events, actual significant depressions. And so, oh, well, this is just another one of those challenges, and that's where the resilience things come in. You have to try and put things into perspective, and not run around panicking. First think, okay, what's this likely to be like, and how are we going to work through it? And that's what we sat down as a team, and came up with a plan and then worked our way through it.
It's a good point you mentioned. We're sitting here in August 24 recording this. I don't think I've ever seen the world in my lifetime with this much unrest. Are you making any plans or provisions for what you're seeing abroad at the moment?
It's certainly an interesting time, but I mean, once again, you have to compare it to, in a mild extent, when the Cold War broke out, that was pretty serious stuff. The Soviet Union and the US were standing there with their fingers on the triggers, threatening both to end the world. So, that was pretty bad. And then, of course, if you were in business in 1939, and then the whole world erupted into a world war that had global consequences, that would have been a very serious situation. But, unfortunately with wars, a lot of people get killed and lives get disrupted, but it also does provide business opportunities. So, it's a mixed bag is how I would describe that, Darren.
So if Amazon Web Service is turned off tomorrow, what have you done to make sure that you've still got access to everything that you need? Have you got plan Bs in place for that kind of stuff, IP protection and that sort of thing?
No, we've done a lot of work on our general IT resilience, and you have to look at your risk management plan. We've got a big risk matrix, which risks are classified. The interesting thing is, 4 years ago when I pulled that out, the one risk that wasn't on it was a global pandemic. So I think we have to be creative in terms of establishing what the risks are out there, and then you just got to have a plan to work through it. But fortunately, we're of a size where we have an IT department and we have a good outsourced IT provider, and we have a lot of things in place to deal with it.
Interestingly, I had a conversation recently about Northland as a region, and thinking about some of our key strengths, so tourism and horticulture, agriculture, that kind of industry. And I thought to myself at that time, just even as a region, we have quite a risk. If we have a massive weather event or if we have another pandemic, we're quite at risk. So what is our third string to our bow, and where does that fit in playing to our strengths, but also understanding sort of where we're going? You have any thoughts on that one? We are somewhat isolated, and you might say that that's actually a strength sometimes. But for those of us that operate businesses around the country, having a road that wasn't working and then flights that quite often didn't work as well was more than a pain. We have a lot of creativity in our region, and if you look at the marine sector, for example, we're one of the significant areas of marine excellence in the country, and a lot of it happens, either up at Opua or down the end of Port Road in Whangarei, and a lot of people probably don't realise that it's there. But it comes down to people. Yeah, I agree. So just shifting gears a little bit, thinking about some of the things you've just said. You're big enough to have an IT department. You have a risk matrix and the likes. Thinking about your own Naut, your own startup, your own new business, and maybe that's where many people watching this podcast are. What advice would you give people in that startup mode, and how to go through that process?
I think... So Naut is completely different to McKay. So McKay is nearly 90 years old. Naut is 3 years old, and McKay is a well-established family-owned business in a very, I guess, by comparison, a very conventional area. Naut is a brand new tech startup that's trying to change the marine propulsion world, and so the key part of what Naut wants to be is an electric propulsion company. So that's electric outboards, inboards that drive stern drives, and inboard systems that power jet boats. And in fact, Naut is agnostic to what the final drive or what the boat is. But you've got the challenges. You've got brand new technology. You've got the challenges of energy density, like you have with electric propulsion as against hydrocarbon-based propulsion. And effectively, you're trying to create not only enter the market, you're trying to also help create the market. So you've got to do both. But I guess on several significant things. One is, Naut's got the great advantage that it was spun out of McKay. So the early work that was being done in electric propulsion in smaller boats, so in that 6 to 12 metre region that McKay was doing, that's now being transferred across to Naut. And so having, I guess, a big brother company on its doorstep has been a huge advantage, and, when you've got challenges going on all the time, like, even like they are, even today, we've got the ability to leverage off the big brother company that's Naut's associated with. But, once again, you need to have self-belief, you need to have a plan, and you have to be, and you need to be well-resourced, and that includes capital. I think, one of the reasons Naut was spun out separately was so that external capital could be obtained, and that has been obtained, and probably there's going to have to be another funding round happen, but that's how it was designed to be. And that's what should happen. Happens to be a pretty tough period in the VC world at the moment, but that'll turn around as things always do.
As the risk appetite grows. Any final words you might want to give to aspiring business people who might be going through a growth period, looking to change, grow? Anything final thoughts you want to leave us with? One of the things, there's lots of things I could talk about, but one of the things my father talked about a lot is you have to look after the company that you have, and I don't know how many small businesses you see the first thing they do is go and put themselves in hock for a brand new Ford Ranger or whatever. Do you need to do that? If you when you're getting your business going, could you get by with an older ute? And I just use that as an example, So wait till you got some runs on the board and some resilience in the business, and you need to be able to put a few bales of hay away for those lean times. So how much? And I often hear people talk about having so many months of cash behind them before. Do you have a general rule of thumb? It's been a while since we've had to think about that. And in our case, most of our customers are government, local government, or blue chip corporates who generally pay us all the time. So, interesting question. I mean, if you're a small business with I guess some vagaries in terms of who's paying you, 3 to 6 months sounds like would sort of be the numbers I'd be thinking about. That's for sure. I mean, you need enough time so that if you do get an indication that things are going to turn bad on you, you've got time to make some changes in the business, lower your costs. Worst case, if you're employing people, you might have to consider a restructure, and be prepared to make some tough choices. Is there something you look to give you those macro indicators of what you want to do with your business when you're looking on the horizon and thinking, where's my next deal coming from, or is the market going to stay strong?
Oh, we've got some reasonably sophisticated tools that we developed ourselves that look at our forward committed work, how many months out there's that, and how big, in order to generate the work for to meet our existing turnover, how big does the sales pipeline have to be based on a certain win rate? So we have all those metrics that we have in the business, and that gives us an idea about where we are. And collectively, our forward work is generally sitting well over a year. So, well, at this time of the economic cycle, we've got to be pretty happy with that. Yeah.
No, definitely. Well, it's been great hearing from you today, Lindsay. Lots of war stories, lots of experience to dwell on, and I'm sure all of our community will be better for it. So I just want to thank Lindsay Faithfull, the 2022 entrant of the Northland Business Excellence Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryn, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks.